So, I went through the first Deus Ex, Human Revolution, and Mankind Divided again. And it's a real challenge trying to come up with a way to be in any way eloquent without going completely rambly. I mean, I know what I call these things I make, but the idea is to keep them at least a little concise, and my first few drafts were at least 30 minutes of non-stop talking. And that's unfinished drafts, which means that's at least like 60-70%. That is more. Anyway, I believe immersive sims as a genre owe a lot to Deus Ex 1. There's Thief and System Shock and Dark Messiah and Bloodlines and whatever else someone might bring up, but everyone agrees that the first Deus Ex is definitely a very good game, and I agree. But both as a kid and now as an adult coming back to it, I have noticed flaws and personal pet peeves which are not necessarily flaws, but they are just not my cup of tea. And the best way to describe them is by comparing them to the other games, Human Revolution and Mankind Divided, which I am just gonna shorten to Jensen games. So the first thing that comes to mind is the level design. It's clear to me that the levels of the first game are meant to be logical. You have military bases, Fort Clinton, underwater facility, biotech corp office, etc, etc. It's not necessarily perfectly realistic, but the idea is that they are designed with a function in mind. Jensen games are entirely different in what they are designed to be fun stealth game levels. You have boxes all over the place, just in the right position to bypass a patrol path of the guards, cameras which have blind spots everywhere, vents which lead absolutely everywhere and always have space for a fully grown man, the list goes on. Technically all of those things do happen in the first game, but they are extremely few and far between when you compare it to Jensen games. I mean, even the first level is already an obvious example of that, in each of those games really. Liberty Island is gigantic, and there are a lot of ways to approach it, but it's extremely open. There are turrets, NSF with both pistols and rifles, a sentry bot and lasers. And getting past that, especially without any skills or augments, this early can be really challenging. Meanwhile, in Human Revolution you can always look around and find an easy way to bypass absolutely everything, even without augments. In the Serif plant, taken over by the Humanity Front goons or whatever they are, there is a way up the roof, convenient low path as well, leading all the way to the main door, where the guards don't really look at it very much. And then inside you can easily climb up the shelves and those shelves have a convenient bridge between them, so the player can just keep going without an issue. There's still a degree to skill to it, but the point is that if you look, there is always a path through, and that path always leads into more easy, safe to traverse areas. Which is another point, difficulty. Jensen games are simply a lot more easy. Maybe they can be a bit more difficult if going guns blazing because the Dragon Tooth sword is so stupidly overpowered, and also regeneration, goddamn. JC just regenerates limbs without a problem. Anyway, because of that, it's hard to make combat difficult in the first game. But the combat is definitely not the point of Deus Ex, stealth is. The player is actively discouraged from harming anyone and rewarded for going non-lethal. Question is, which one do I prefer? The more difficult, realistic levels of the first game, or the silly boxes all over the place of the newer titles? The second, by far. And it leads into another point, exploration. I think the best way to explain my problem with the exploration is by listing the level of the first game, the La Guardia Airport. The main entrance involves the player popping up in the middle of it. There's also a dock, but whatever. So the main entrance appears in the middle, and you need to walk all the way to the other side of a hangar to get to the objective. But there's a lot to explore and find, however, it's obviously guarded. Turrets, bots patrolling the area, armed guards, bots, more bots, and cameras. And also bots. But the problem is what most of the player can find is rifle ammo, binoculars, knives, maybe a lockpick and some other likely useless garbage. And the worst part is, just get the main objective and the whole place becomes completely safe. Unetka sweeps in and all the guards are gone, turrets disabled, and JC is free to loot everything not nailed down without a problem. What is even the point of exploring it beforehand? Meanwhile, Jensen can find something, get XP boost for praxis, take some useless gun or ammo, sell it, or discover some cool background tidbits, like emails between random people. Granted, those existed in the first game as well, but let's be honest, it's nowhere near as much. Meanwhile, there are also certain facts found that can be used in a dialogue, or a way to complete quests differently. And yeah, this is a little tidbit which I forgot to write, but actually I do kinda like the hacking minigame with Jensen, while in Deus Ex 1 you just press hack and it just happens, and you have a timer to look for everything. That is not very interesting. Anyway, all of this brings me up to another point, the immersive sim depth, meaning how many ways there are to tackle the problem. And again, I prefer Jensen games over the first one, mainly because the dialogue isn't just a list of things to say. There are choices which can have drastic consequences sometimes. And what I especially adore are the dialogue boss battles, bypassing combat, getting into some secret areas and so on and so forth. I do wish more games did this. Besides that, sometimes, not always, but sometimes the game also acknowledges when the player doesn't just use non-lethal, but also doesn't harm anybody, sneaking through. Probably most prominent in the Missing Link DLC for Human Revolution, although Mankind Divided also does that with Rucker. Keitner in the Missing Link can say different things depending on the situation. Lethal, non-lethal, alarms, is anyone knocked out, yada yada. I do wish it was more deep, maybe add something like the chaos system in Dishonored, but, well, baby steps. These are all fundamental things I can think of, but there are a few smaller points to bring up. Like melee, for example. Jensen has this system where he goes into cutscenes for every single punch thrown, and he needs to regen back the energy. For stealth, it's definitely a powerful tool, stopping time during the animation after all. But logically, not having any kind of access to something what could simply whack things is just silly. So often I wanted to break doors or walls or something else without a special augment, and instead had to groan and move on, which is very different in the first game. By the way, again, Dragon's Tooth Sword. God, it makes things so much more convenient. Problem is that it's still extremely clunky. First-person melee is rarely fun, and Deus Ex is no exception. It's just that having an ability to pry open doors and such is generally preferred to whatever Jensen does. Although I don't think anyone sane finds the prod in the first game taking multiple hits to knock people out fun. Unless headshotting, which is headshot in melee. Yeah, makes sense. You can't seriously tell me that this is a good thing. Jensen's taser is so much better. Ammo is another thing. First game has various ammo for a lot of different weapons. It doesn't come up too often though. Mainly with a crossbow. But with mods, it does come up a lot more, which I actually strongly recommend everyone plays the first Deus Ex with GMDX, meaning Give Me Deus Ex. That mod adds an ability to climb ledges, which makes the game so much more enjoyable. I wish my first time playing the game was with that mod, because holy crap, stacking up tiny boxes on top of big boxes with more tiny boxes is some of the most frustrating bullshit imaginable. But yeah, aside from that, mod also adds different ammo, like non-lethal shotgun shells or taser darts, which is pretty nice. Human Revolution doesn't have any of that, and it definitely suffers as a result, while Mankind Divided brings it back, which adds a lot of enjoyable depth. Due to things like pistol EMP bullets, popping a silent shot into a laser to bypass a heavily defended area is very satisfying. It doesn't trigger the alarm, and you can just move past without any kind of special augment. All for the low cost of just one bullet. And if fighting, cycling between ammo and armor penetration, EMP and the normal bullets can be pretty fun as well. Again, I definitely prefer Mankind Divided over the original when it comes to ammo. There is another topic, which is a lot more difficult to quantify or directly point out, which is the style or the theme. And in my opinion, if there is something Human Revolution has in spades, then it's that. The game is outdated by now, sure, but it's still gorgeous in my opinion. Although the animation can definitely look terrible. When NPCs are talking, it's like 4 or 5 animations they play out and they keep cycling through them. It looks pretty stupid. Anyway, the backgrounds, the random sci-fi doodads, random Renaissance influences. I remember looking at the concept art of Human Revolution and loving it so damn much. And the locations are very memorable, with my personal favorite being the first visit to Hengsha, where you can can get cramped city streets, high-rise building, amazing verticality, by the way. Wish more games focused on adding verticality to levels. Anyway, there are also sewers, nightclubs, ruined parking garage, fancy apartment buildings. It feels like a city where a person can get lost and have fun doing it. And when compared to the first Deus Ex, oof, it doesn't exactly stack up. I do like Hong Kong, definitely, but, well, let's just say that the game definitely shows its age as well. So very much. To be honest, it doesn't feel like it had a single unified theme or vision. I remember when I was a kid, I saw the game in action and I was surprised. It looked like total ass. And I grew up playing NES games, so the bar isn't exactly high. It's not the graphics per se, but it is a part of it. Some games simply have a timeless look to them, and I would say it applies to both Human Revolution and Mankind Divided. Although this timelessness is definitely less so for Mankind Divided. Dishonored is another example of this kind of thing. It's simply a great timeless look to that game. The first Deus Ex is not that. It's serviceable, but I dare say I prefer something like Morrowind or Dread Delusion. But yeah, I think it's obvious that without that first game, so many things just wouldn't be here today. They wouldn't be possible, and I did enjoy the game enough to finish it multiple times as a kid. Now when I think about it, I probably finished the first game like twice as many times as Mankind Divided. But yeah, that's mostly down to the performance and how long the loading takes. I simply didn't have as much time with it as I did with the first game, and that game just runs on everything. But yeah, I didn't exactly figure out why don't I enjoy the first game as much as the later, as Anthem Jensen games. I simply had more fun with them. Anyway, I would like to bring up Mankind Divided alone as well. So a lot of people say that the game is unfinished. And yeah, that is kinda true. And that naturally makes people think that the game is actually tiny. It is not. I finished it again for the third time probably. I think, and it's definitely lengthy. And a lot of it is in the side content. And I have realized that it's kind of a reason why it was my favorite back in the day. And it still is now. Prague is just too damn fun to explore. So much to find, so much to do. And none of it is forced onto the player. They're simply free to tackle whatever the hell they want. Man, if anything, NPCs complain if a player actually takes too long in the beginning. It doesn't really mean anything, but yeah, they do that. And I think I went so silly, I robbed the Palisade bank, found the underground casino, hung out with the cult in the sewers, all before first stepping foot into TF29. But that's just what you could do, and I adore that. It makes me wonder, what if someone would just make an open world game like that? And I mean proper open world, not Ubisoft climb everything and repeat the same stupid task over and over in the most repetitive areas imaginable kind of open world. Not that at all. From what I've read, Cyberpunk should be that, but I haven't tackled that yet. I gotta get the PC up to scruff. Mankind Divided was already laggy at less than 30 FPS often, and now with RAM Apocalypse is, maybe no time soon. Anyway, that's just wishful thinking. I just wanted to separate the thoughts on Mankind DLC as well. So after reading Reddit, I can clearly see what Desperate Measures is part of a main game, cut out for the sake of turning it into DLC. Infuriating, just like the original marketing campaign, "Augment your pre-order." Oh god, that was terrible. Anyway, insulting how short that DLC was. Short and simple, considering it's an entire well-made area. It was obviously meant to be more than a forgettable DLC, but one of the main plot points of the entire game. And it actually plays very similar to how Rizika's investigation goes, so I'm guessing those two were kinda supposed to be close together. Quite frankly, I feel the same way about System Rift. But the second DLC, but there is more to it. It's obvious that the main game bank heist mission and this DLC are essentially the same thing, only set in slightly different areas. But the DLC is just more interesting. To me, it feels like this DLC is what the main heist mission was supposed to be. The location is all the cutscenes over water. It's that weird blue structure what appears all the time. This gigantic weird thing. You can even see it in the distance during the game if you look out into the water. Anyway, bank heist, meanwhile, is obviously an accessible area, but it feels kind of like it was slapped together at the last moment. And the heist itself is a lot more basic than the DLC. You can bypass most of the defenses just by shooting one fan and climbing down some stairs. While the DLC has this giant area, and that the elevator specifically to the server area isolated and so dangerous a lot of employees have died there and were covered up. Also, yeah, this backstory is definitely a lot more deep than anything the bank itself has. And even then, the player only tackles a small part of this blade. And there are many of these Palisade blades around Prague. Again, it feels like publishers, or hell, even developers sometimes they go insane, so I wouldn't know for sure. Anyway, people just working on the game had to cut out parts to make a DLC. Would have been so much better if it was actually inside it as well. By the way, it's amusing how developers added a guard who specifically has to come up to the player and go, "This isn't Palisade Bank, it's a Palisade Blade." Thank you, guard. That's an easy mistake to make. And it was wonderful to see Pritchard as well. He was definitely a highlight. His relationship with Jensen was definitely a highlight for me. It's just so much snark. I love it. Those two are wonderful together. Now, the third DLC, The Criminal Past. And that's the only one that doesn't really feel like it was cut out. It's not like the other two. Criminal Past is a flashback story to the early missions, which is a part of a time skip pre-Mankind Divided. So the chronology is kind of confusing there. And again, I felt like the DLC is really cool, but the problem is that so much of the area is entirely pointless. The whole DLC is set inside this huge prison, and vast majority of the area is either entirely irrelevant or entirely optional. Like, for example, the prisoners' cells. You can explore almost all of them, and they just don't have nearly anything in them. Also, the objective design is kinda horrendous in that DLC, because the player is supposed to go from one heavily defended area during the riot to another. And then back again. And again. And if they do all the optional stuff, of which there is actually very little optional stuff, they'll get a disappointing ending which doesn't really say anything. There's a really cool scene with Jensen asking a question, but I feel like there's nothing said about the actual aftermath. So it's not like anything you did truly mattered. And I'm especially upset about Flossie, who is set up to be this really cool character who is the cause for this riot, and all the while he keeps trying to call somebody, and I don't think anything ever came of it. Honestly, it does kind of feel like there's supposed to be a storyline there where Flossie was trying to expose it and Jensen would try to stop it, because it would compromise the junkyard investigation. But none of it came into the actual gameplay. Quite frankly, it feels like a lot of these games, a lot of the games that come out would have a great beginning and then fumble the last part, only this is in the DLC. Because again, exploring the prison, especially without augments, was really, really cool. It was dangerous, an alarm could jumpstart the riot, and every single item found could be a lot more valuable than in the main game. Also, the fact that you can't knock anyone out, or even kill them because you don't have any weapons or a way to melee people without any energy, that was extremely restrictive as well. And if you do find something, it can be so much more valuable than anything you find in the main game. But then the riot starts and it just kind of goes into, quote, endgame, so to speak. If I had to guess, it feels like the kind of mission what happens like some sort of midpoint. Like we just had a big fight and now we're gonna go to Delara to talk some things out. Imagine Mankind Divided, what is about twice as long as what we've got. And the result of all the stuff that happens during the prison riot would be in that second half. And I'm guessing Fixer, Mejia and Flossie would all pop up there as well. Same with Rabia, and whatever was going on with the collective and so on. Basically all the cool setup which happened in Mankind Divided would pop up there. So the original plan was to make this huge, long game, like hundreds of hours for a normal playthrough kind of game at least, probably more than that. And instead it was cut up into these pieces as Square Enix decided, yeah, you guys need to ship a game now, with shitty pre-order bonuses, instead of creating one of the best games ever, and finish those things you were working on before. That's DLC now. Horrendous. So, yeah, I did enjoy the DLC, I did enjoy Mankind Divided, and I do believe Mankind Divided is my favorite. But we could have had so much more. And that's what makes me so sad.